welcome to my discussions. Now I'm going to discuss the Unit 4, The Archipelago by the excerpt of the Tesseract by Alex Garland. So, from the background knowledge, here is the background knowledge. One of the settings of the excerpt we are about to read takes place in Manila Bay. According to the editors of the Encyclopedia Britannica, Manila Bay is considered one of the world's great harbors. It is historically important in Denmark because of its location near the Southeast Asian mainland. It was already commercially important when, in 1571, the Spanish colonizers began building fortifications at the site of present-day Manila. In 1574, the Chinese pirate Lim Ah Hong entered the bay with a force of nearly 3,000 but was repulsed by Spanish forces. Manila Bay was the western terminus of the Manila Archipelago galleon raid between 1593 and 1815. The decisive naval battle of the Spanish-American War. The Battle of the Manila Bay took place there on May 1, 1898, when Colonel George Dewey's U.S. fleet destroyed the Spanish fleet of Cavite. During World War II, many Philippine, American, and Japanese ships were sunk by aerial bombardment at Manila, Cavite, Corregidor, and other locations. In March 1945, Manila Bay was regained by U.S. forces. Encyclopedia Britannica 2015. After the Philippines gained its independence, Manila Harbor has become an important shipping harbor, dealing in domestic and international shipping. The excerpt are about to read describes the Philippines and seeks to portray the many ironies and inequalities that can be found there and how the American protagonist finds them strange. Who is Alex Garland? So, Alexander Mendower Garland, born May 26, 1970, is an English writer and filmmaker. He rose to prominence as a novelist in the late 1990s with his novel The Beach, which led some critics to call Garland a K-voice of Generation X. He subsequently received praise for the screenplays of the films 28 Days Boily, Never Let Me Go on 2010 and Dread on 2012. He co-wrote the video game Enslaved: Odyssey to the West 2010 and was a story supervisor on DMC Civil Me Cry on 2013. All about this excerpt. An intricately woven, suspenseful novel of psychological and political intrigue. The Tesseract follows the interlocking fate of three sets of characters in the Philippines: gangsters in a chase through the streets of Manila, a middle-class mother putting her children to bed in the suburbs and remembering her first dog, and a couple of street kids and the wealthy psychiatrist who is studying their dreams. Alex Garland demonstrates the range of his extraordinary talents as a novelist in his national bestseller, a Chinese puzzle of a novel about three intersecting sets of characters in the Philippines. So now let's go to the excerpt, The Tesseract by Alex Garland. There was no bright color in the room. Outside there was plenty. Through the bars of the window, seen could be sunlight and drifting litter and flashes of foliage in the narrow gaps between squatter shacks. But inside nothing. Vision captivated by itch, muted by the hopelessly dim lamps that sat on each side of the bed. Stains said, seen under his breath. It was something that the hotel room had in common with the street 2 stories below. In both places, there wasn't a single surface with some kind of grub scar, everything marked by rain or dust. Smoke, the overspill from the open sewers, The open fires that burned on the pavement, and blood. There was blood on the bedsheets. The spatter had peeled from few hard scrubs, but it was still readily recognizable for what it was. I think. The other things that this room shared with the city, oozing out from the sun, hit like molasses. Once it touched you, you were stuck with it. It had touched Sin that afternoon as he sat on Manila Bay's low harbor wall, looking out at the cargo ships and their fat arc chains. Up to then, he'd been protected by the reassuring aircon of an Ermita McDonald's. He'd gone before breakfast around 10 a.m. with a copy of Issue Week ruled in his fist. At 11:15, he stood up to leave and walk toward the exit, where the blue uniformed McDonald's security guard had obligingly lowered his stockless shotgun and held the door open, or obligingly held the door open and lowered his stockless shotgun. Either way, one blast of the scored air and Sin had spun his heels and marched back inside. But cool as it was in McDonald's, after a couple of hours, Sin could feel the edges of his mind starting to fray. It wasn't the obsessive wiping and washing and ashes removing so much as the sprawling children's party that had commanded half the sitting area. The sound made a dozen adult heads turn, and had one of the minders reaching under his barong Tagalog to the bulge in his waistband. So time to go. Armed with a milkshake, Sin had left the McDonald's and walked to the waterfront, where he'd hoped he might kill time in the company of the cool sea breeze. There was an executive bathroom hand dryer brewing down his neck. The milkshake had turned to chocolate soap before it was even a quarter finished. The bench he'd chosen was like leaning against an open door, and the sparse canopies of the palm trees had offered nothing more than a rumor of shade. Yet somehow, Sin had managed to stick it out until 4. He couldn't remember much about how the time had passed. He was simply glad that it had. Ships and water were good for distracting a head that needed to be distracted. Good for a blink in the mild frown, and a glance at the watch that said half an hour had swept by. Sin's only clear memory of that afternoon was standing on the harbor wall and looking down at the beach shellfish and the crust of floating refuse. Like little islands, hid though, watching the polystyrene chips and plastic bags that bobbed in the swell. The two archipelagos beneath me, one too big to think about, and the other too big to see. My understanding about this excerpt. The Tesseract has a trace of a thriller, but it's also a love story. A character study, a portrait of the life among Manila street kids, even experiment in narration, a feverish, affecting altogether captivating story, what really makes. The Tesseract's so gripping is the author's dazzling performance as a storyteller, not the bloody climax spear, see, but the innovative techniques and left changes of pace with which they are related. This is one of those rare novels that can be read for thrills but also taken apart and examined the way a jeweler does a fine watch. Garland also lavishes his characters with quirks that ring true, outbursts of human oddity that transform a moment that most authors would rush past into something memorable. All but flawless, a tower to the force of brilliant narration and psychological acuity. That would be all. Once again, I'm Galier's sister. Thank you for watching.